Abram, and I'll probably begin calling him Abraham here in a minute. It happened, so overlook that. Right now he's Abram. But Abram and Willie Nelson had something in common. They're on the road again. And I don't know whether you've ever noticed how often people in the Bible are changing their addresses. But it happens quite frequently. It seems like someone's always on the move in just about any biblical story we read. Someone's on the move. And it's hard to find anyone who's in a serious drama with God who isn't on the move. You know, I got to thinking about moving this week in reading this passage of Scripture. Truth be told, I don't read them on the same day that it says to read them in our Read Through the Bible guide, because who knows, I might want to preach on Romans, and every Romans we've had has been on Saturday. I can't wait till Saturday to read it, so I have to read ahead and try to keep ahead. But earlier this week I read this passage of Scripture, and I couldn't help but start thinking about moving, having to move. And I remember as a kid growing up outside of Fairmont, a little community called Eldora, and Dad built the house. We worked on it as he had money. It took us 16 years to build that house, to get it completed the way he wanted it. He'd go out and borrow $5,000, which was a fortune at that time, work on the house, we ran out of money, pay that loan off, go get some more. 16 years. I was 16 years, no, I was in my senior year of high school. Fairmont Senior, West Fairmont. And the interstate came through, I-79. I took her home. Never thought we would ever move, Mom and Dad bought a place in Fairmont because I was starting at school at Fairmont State, and the kid and my brother, one brother and sister were going to Fairmont Senior and whatnot, so bought a place in Fairmont. Kids all graduated, moved away from home. Mom and Dad moved again. Bought some 9 acres of ground between Fairmont and Morgantown out on White Lake Creek, and built a beautiful home out there. My mom and Dad lived there until my dad passed. My mom lived 2 more years there. It was too much for her to take care of. She moved to Morgantown. Dawn and I moved twice before we bought our home. We bought our home. We lived there 13 years. When our boys were little, we raised them there. We figured we were going to live out our lives there, retire there, and die there. We lived there 13 years. That's all we lived there. We moved into our first parsonage, and we've moved 4 times since we lived in our home in Apple Valley Road in Fairmont. Moving. Something we do. Some of you are pretty settled, but some of you have moved here recently. How many of you have moved within the last 5 years? Jill? Some of you? David? If there were more folks here today, if we had more of our folks here, you would see more hands being raised. Moving is something we do as a nation. I know many of us are settled. I just can't believe that Carol Ramser from up at Pleasant Hill Church lives in the house she was raised in. That's the house she was born in. That was her mom and dad's house. She still lives in that house. But most of us move. Our boys have moved. I don't know how many times since they got out of culinary school over in Pittsburgh. And research seems to suggest that you'll move probably within the next 5 years. Americans move to new homes about every 5 years, and the research says that homeowners have a tendency to stay longer, about 8.2 years, while renters relocate every 2.1 years. This is some stuff from the Census Bureau, and they report that the national median time that people live in a residence is 5.2 years. That means half the people live less than 5.2 years in a residence, and half of the people live more than 5.2 years. Either we don't know why all these people are moving. Either we're chasing the American dream or following new opportunities, whatever they may be, or we're desirous of everything at the same time, willing to go anywhere to find it. For some reason, we move. Either way, we're so busy chasing our dreams that we're sacrificing our sense of place. And what a loss that really is. Because without a place of belonging, we lack a certain centeredness. I think that was Dawn and I's greatest concern as we sold our home and moved. It wasn't the unknown that was out there in front of us. We were in many ways like God calling Abram, pack up your family and move, and I'll show you where you were going. When we said we would go, we didn't have an appointment yet. We didn't know where we were going. But it wasn't that, I think, that concerned us as much as that centeredness that we were losing in living where we had lived and knowing the neighbors on each side of us and having our Sunday school class at church that we could call and depend on and all of that. Home, there is a difference between a home and a house. Home is a concept that goes back to the dawn of humanity. Some say that it may even predate religion. And for millennia, it has given people a sense of peace and safety and stability and belonging. So is our urge to hop to new nests destroying our concept of home? Replacing it with the more sterile idea of housing? We don't build low-income homes, we build low-income housing. That's the way it's referred to anymore. It's housing, it's not homes, it's housing in many instances. Are we failing to pass on the old homestead from one generation to the next, and in the process failing to transmit other important qualities to our descendants? Moving. Whether to a new neighborhood, a new city, a new state, a new job, although it may involve trauma for the kids and the spouse, it need not be a curse, but it can be a blessing. So what makes a transition good or bad is not when we move, but how we move. And the call of Abraham in Genesis 12 gives us some hints about how to make the right move. First, you should only move if God is calling. The message may not come in an audible form, a voice from the cloud saying, "Go from this country and your kindred and to your father's house," as the Lord spoke to Abraham. But the word will come, and it will come in a deep inner sense that you have that a move is going to be right for you and for your loved ones. Right in the sense that it's going to give you new challenges and new responsibilities and new opportunities for growth. That was one of my great concerns. I asked Donna one night. We'd gotten the boys to bed, and Donna and I were sitting in the living room at our home. It was prior to the move. I said, "Can the parsonage be at home for you?" I was worried about that, the sense of losing home. And I asked her, I said, "Can the parsonage be at home for you, Donna?" Well, some of you remember from my first sermon here, our response was, "Any place could be a home for me as long as I have my stuff." So remember, home isn't where the heart is, home is where your stuff is. So, but that was a concern of mine, was losing our home, not our house, but that centeredness, that home that we had developed over those 13 years. I want to point this out to you. God never calls us to new places for more money, or greater luxury, or a bigger nest, or additional acquisitions. We should only move if the new land is a promised land. The Lord wants Abraham to hit the road, not because there's anything wrong where he's presently living. There's nothing wrong with it. But he wants him to hit the road so that he will be in a place for the promise to come true. "I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you, and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing." You see, God is determined to do something wonderful with Abraham. And he's determined to do it with him in the promised land. He's determined determined to be a blessing to him and to make him a blessing for others. And this is our identity as well, folks. If we move to a land where we can fulfill our potential to be a blessing for others through volunteer work, church involvement, family life, and your particular profession. But at the same time, we should not move if our desire is only to escape the problems of our current situation. Unresolved tensions in the present land, where we're at now, have a way of tagging along and polluting the promised land. So we must move only if we have peace with the land we now live in. Some of us in the past have tried to run away from our troubles. You can't do it, can you? Because no matter where you go, they have a tendency to follow you. So it's that way with the promised land. If you've got problems where you're at now, resolve them. And then move on to the promised land. You know, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. Unless we're called by God to hit the road toward a land of promise. And Abraham heard this call, and he moved well, moving to a land where the Lord could use him as a blessing to others, to his family, his descendants, and the people of faith throughout history, including ourselves, including us. We're spiritual descendants of Abraham. Abraham moved, but he didn't lose his sense of place. For him, centeredness came from being in the right place with God and from building altars to the Lord throughout the land of Canaan. We too can retain our sense of place if we build altars through fruitful living wherever we may be. We can have a certain centeredness if we consider each new home to be a Bethel, a house of God. Not a house of luxury, or a house of wealth, or a house of high technology, but a house of God. We're truly centered when we live like Abraham in Bethel, in a house of God, where God can bless us and make us a blessing to others. It's only by making each new house a house of God that we can avoid the motion sickness that leads to the breakdown of home and family. There's nothing wrong with staying home and staying put, folks. Nothing whatsoever. But if we move, we should be careful not to move because we are bad to live, bad to talk, desirous of everything at the same time. Instead, we should move because we desire to hear God's guidance and live in a land of promise. If we are in touch with the God of Abraham, we can be on the road and be a blessing to others wherever our home may be. And finally, there's a sense in which God is calling us to get moving, each of us. No, God may not be asking us to move from a certain geographical location that we live in, that we call home, or to a new job or a new ministry, but God does ask us to recognize that we are on a spiritual journey. We can't get bogged down spiritually. Growth is not an option for us. You certainly can't follow Jesus without moving, and you can't move without leaving something behind. Some disciples were asked to leave behind their families and their possessions. Others were asked to leave their sin or their wealth or even their grief over the dead. You see, Jesus is always moving on, and he expects his followers to travel pretty light. Oh, let me go and bury my dead. Jesus says, you have nothing to do with me. Let me go home and say goodbye to Mommy and Daddy. You have nothing to do with me. The first disciples had a hard time with this and kept asking when Jesus was going to settle down. They were waiting for him to establish his kingdom right then and there, so at last they could stop walking around. They were getting tired of walking around. Like the disciples before us, we don't know exactly where Jesus is leading us. We don't know right now where Jesus is leading us. You know what? I really think that's okay. I really think that's okay. It's exciting sometimes not to know where you're going. Oh, believe me, when Donna and I knew we were going to move, you know, when God would say to us, it's time to go to another home, a new place. And there was some excitement. There was a sense of excitement as that appointment season was going on. And where was it we were going to be going? There was a little sadness leaving folks behind like you that we've grown to love and a community that we have become, grown to cherish. But there was an excitement too. What's Jesus got in store for us now? Where are we following Jesus this appointment season? What's God have in store for us? It's that way with all of us, folks. If Jesus is leading us, most of the time we don't know where we're going. That's okay. You see, we are not being asked to be clear about where we are going. We are being asked simply to turn your eyes upon Jesus. That's what we're being asked to do. Turn our eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face. And the things of this earth will grow strangely dear in the light of his glory and grace. That's what we're called to do. To be Jesus' disciples. To turn our face upon him and follow him wherever he may lead us. And as we keep moving, and we should be moving, folks, as followers of Jesus, as we keep moving, God gives us sustenance for the journey. He says, this is my body, and this is my blood. Come and eat. And we receive that spiritual strength, that spiritual bolstering for the journey that God calls each of us to be on. This is my body, and this is my blood.